My name is Maris Elena Duarte, 27 years old. In 7th grade, Roosevelt Middle School smelled like pencil shavings and old radiator heat, the kind that rattled to life and sighed. Through the hallways as if the building itself were tired of hosting our dramas. The floors creaked with every step, amplifying whispers and secrets until they sounded bigger than they were. Under the buzzing fluorescence, we decided what was true long before any adult confirmed it. That year, our favorite truth was a rumor about Mr. Kellerman. He was young, maybe 26, with kind eyes and a teacher's habit of staying long after the bell. When other teachers vanished to their cars at 3:15, he stayed, patient as a lighthouse, guiding kids who'd fallen behind back into safe water. I can still see him at the lab table, sleeves rolled, marker uncapped, explaining photosynthesis for the 5th time to someone who finally dared to admit they didn't get it. He made the world seem solvable if you just asked the right question. The rumor started as a tremor. Brianna Chen said she saw him crying in his car after parent-teacher conferences, 10 full minutes of shoulders shaking behind a fogged windshield. Madison Wright swore she heard him on the phone during planning period, voice breaking on, "I can't keep doing this much longer." Angela Russo said she'd seen him take pills at lunch, real medication, from an orange bottle he hid behind his coffee mug. We carried those pieces through the cafeteria like coins we couldn't stop spending. We built theories as easily as we built paper bridges in science class. Maybe he was drowning in student loans, working 3 jobs. Maybe a girlfriend left him and he was shattered. Maybe he hated teaching and planned to quit. Then Tessa Valdez lowered her voice and said she thought he was sick, really sick, terminal sick. Her mom had cried in the car like that when she had cancer. Tessa's eyes were sure in a way that made the air around our table go quiet. Someone snapped that young people don't get cancer. Tessa said her cousin did. 24, dead by 25, and the forks stopped moving. The building seemed to agree with us. The windows in his classroom rattled on windy days like teeth. The plants on the sill began to wilt, leaves cupping inward, soil dry. Sometimes, mid-lesson, Mr. Kellerman would stop writing and stare out the window, like the horizon had something to say to him. Rebecca Torres whispered that she'd heard him throwing up in the faculty bathroom. Marcus Fleming said his hands shook when he wrote on the whiteboard, like his grandpa's did with Parkinson's. Jennifer Park claimed he told the principal he needed to leave early for appointments, 3 times in 1 week. Doctor appointments, she added, as if that solved the equation. Alexis Young had the clincher. Her mom worked in the office and saw him filling out medical forms. Lots of them. The evidence stacked itself. He bought cafeteria food and didn't eat it, just pushed it around until the bell rang. He slept at his desk during lunch, not grading, actually sleeping, arm as a pillow. He looked thinner under the fluorescent lights, shirts hanging loose, smile straining at the edges. He still stayed late after school. And because we were 12 and terrified, we became better people for a while. Class clowns kept their jokes. Kids who never raised their hands did. We left small gifts, an apple, a cookie, a solar system drawn with glitter pens. Anonymous thank yous slid into his mailbox like we were paying a debt we couldn't name. Once, I stayed after to redo a lab and noticed a sealed manila envelope on his desk. In blue marker, he'd written, "To period 1, if I'm out." Then smaller, curiosity instructions. I didn't touch it. I did notice the orange prescription bottle tucked behind his coffee mug. When he looked up and caught me looking, his expression softened, then shuddered, as if kindness had to pass through customs before it could reach me. By December, half of 7th grade had voted the rumor true. The more we believed it, the more proof we saw. He told us the week before winter break that teaching us had been the highlight of his day. The way he said it made my stomach drop, like he was memorizing our faces. After Christmas, he was gone. We filed into first period and found a stranger, Mrs. Rodriguez, strict and older, glasses she peered over like they offended her. The fun posters were stripped from the walls, leaving tape scars and beige rectangles. The plants on the windowsill were already curled brown. The air felt cold in a new way. Dr. Kellerman has taken a leave of absence for personal reasons, she announced without looking up. We're returning to standard curriculum. It sounded like a punishment. The room went quiet in a shape I'd never felt before. We did worksheets. We read from the textbook like ingredients on a cereal box. no experiments, no group projects, no moment where wonder outran the bell. In the cafeteria, we tried out explanations like costumes. He'd gone to a specialized treatment center. He'd moved to spend his last months with family. He died over break, and the school wouldn't say because we were too young to carry it. We asked the principal. He told us to focus on academics. We asked other teachers. They changed the subject. Even Mr. Chen, who used to chat with him in the hallway, said he's dealing with difficult personal circumstances and pressed his lips like a door closing. Mrs. Patterson at the front desk, the one who always knew everything, went quiet when his name came up. That silence felt like confirmation and betrayal in the same breath. 2 days after the announcement, the principal boxed up what remained of his desk. The sealed envelope was gone. I watched the cardboard disappear down the corridor like a patient taken for tests and not brought back. We never asked where it went. We were 12 and thought kindness meant not making trouble. We tried to be good for him. For a week, we were model students in science class for a teacher who wasn't there. Then the grief soured. Detentions stacked for small things. Asking to use the bathroom. Whispering when the radiator clanked like a dying animal. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't understand why we'd turned feral. We didn't either. We just knew that the person who made learning feel like discovery had vanished, and the room that used to hum now sounded like a refrigerator. The last time I passed his classroom that winter, I looked through the narrow window and saw my reflection instead of him, a smudge of a girl with a backpack too big for her shoulders. It was snowing outside, soft and stubborn. I thought of the envelope and the way his eyes had flicked to it, then to me, like he hoped it would find us on a day he couldn't. I imagined what it might say. Question everything. Be kind first. Don't leave the plants unwatered. We carried the rumor into spring like a candle cupped in our hands. Some of us tried to find him. Jennifer got her sister to drive by his apartment, but the manager said he'd moved out. Marcus asked his mother to call the district. They said they couldn't discuss former employees. We told ourselves that meant something official was happening, something adult we weren't allowed to understand. It made us feel both protected and small. I built him a future in my head. In the good version, he finished treatment and came back in a pale blue shirt with a new haircut and a doctor's note, and we all clapped too hard. In the bad version, we were living in the after of a before we hadn't appreciated. The truth was a fog bank between those shores, and we kept walking into it because we couldn't stand the bright light of not knowing. On the last day before summer, I found a folded note taped under my lab stool. Thank you for asking the hard questions. In his handwriting, no name. Maybe he'd left it weeks before. Maybe he'd come back one afternoon and slipped it there while we were in gym. I pressed it into the back of my notebook like a leaf. Sometimes proof is a private thing. By June, we had a ritual. Someone said, "Do you remember when Mr. Kellerman..." And we'd finish the sentence with something small and golden, the way he laughed when sodium popped in water, the way he tilted his head when a kid risked an answer. We were trying to preserve him in amber, but rumors don't make good amber. They let too much air in. He slipped through anyway. Weeks became years. What we didn't know hardened into what we believed. And because we were children, we did the cruelest kind of kindness. We mourned him while he was still breathing. We memorialized a man still living, without knowing what we'd actually lost. Spring semester began like waking up in someone else's dream. Familiar walls, unfamiliar air. Mrs. Rodriguez still ran our science class like a military drill, and the word curiosity might as well have been banned. We went from building model volcanoes to memorizing atomic numbers, from laughing to counting the seconds until the bell. But what haunted us most wasn't what was happening in class. It was what wasn't being said anywhere else. No one mentioned Mr. Kellerman, not the teachers, not the principal, not even Mrs. Patterson, the front desk gossip who used to know who was dating who, which teacher was getting married, and what brand of coffee the superintendent liked. Her silence felt like an order. It didn't stop us. Jennifer Park convinced her older sister to drive past his apartment complex one weekend. The blinds were drawn, mailbox empty, nameplate gone. Moved out months ago, the manager said. No forwarding address. Brianna tried asking her mom to call the district office, pretending it was about transferring credits. The clerk said, "Personnel matters are confidential," and hung up. And then, out of nowhere, the whispers started again. A second rumor, meaner this time. Someone said a parent had complained about him staying late with students. Unprofessional boundaries, they called it. It didn't take long before people started saying that's why he left. A single anonymous accusation was enough to paint the blank spaces any color you wanted. I didn't believe it. None of us did. But belief isn't a shield when grown-ups decide what's true. One afternoon, I walked by the main office and caught a glimpse through the half-open door. The principal was sealing a cardboard box. On top sat Mr. Kellerman's framed class photo, our faces frozen mid-laugh around a bubbling beaker. Beneath it, the edge of a familiar envelope peeked out. The same one I'd seen on his desk. 2.1, if I'm out. He taped the box shut without a glance. I almost stepped inside, but my courage evaporated as soon as his secretary looked up. The door clicked, and that was that. By March, the rumor had changed shape again. Some said he'd been fired. Others said he'd taken a job in another district. Alexis swore her mom saw a hospital parking pass under the papers on his desk before it was cleared. Said it must mean he was getting treatment out of town. We didn't know which version to grieve, so we grieved them all. At lunch, our old table turned into a kind of seance. We'd whisper new evidence like gospel. He still has stuff in the storage closet. I saw his name in the system when Mrs. Patterson printed schedules. Mr. Chen looked sad when I asked about him. Marcus said quietly, "What if he really was sick, and they made him leave because someone complained? What if they ruined his life and lied about it?" Nobody answered. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Sometimes adults do the wrong thing for the right reason. Sometimes they do the right thing too late." Weeks passed. The school's mood hardened. Our brief kindness faded into the same restless noise it had been before he arrived. Only now, there was guilt mixed into it, like static you couldn't turn off. When Mrs. Rodriguez gave us another packet of worksheets, Derek muttered, "Mr. Kellerman never gave us busy work." "He's not here," she snapped. "And he's not coming back." Her words landed like slamming lockers. That night, the first thunderstorm of spring hit. The power flickered twice before going out completely. I lit a candle and found the note I'd saved. "Thank you for asking the hard questions." I traced the ink with my thumb until it smudged. Maybe he'd written it for someone else. Maybe it didn't matter. It was proof he'd seen me once. That was enough to keep me curious. By May, the box of his things disappeared from the office. When Brianna asked Mrs. Patterson where it went, she hesitated, then said, "Storage," in the tone adults use when they mean, "Don't ask again." But that summer, the story followed us home like a shadow. Madison said she'd overheard her mother talking on the phone, something about a teacher who had a family emergency and insurance paperwork that had been a nightmare to process. We wanted to believe it was him. And yet, part of us didn't, because it was easier to think he'd chosen to leave than to think he'd been taken by something no one could fix. The last week of school, the principal called an assembly to talk about appropriate student-teacher boundaries. He never said Mr. Kellerman's name, but we all knew why we were there. The words slid around the truth like oil on water. Sitting in that auditorium, my stomach twisted. They were rewriting the story right in front of us, turning kindness into suspicion, dedication into danger. After the assembly, Marcus found me by the lockers. "You think it's true?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I think someone wanted it to be." He nodded, jaw tight. "Then we'll remember it right." We didn't make a pact out loud, but it was there. A promise held in silence. To remember the real version. The teacher who stayed late because he cared, who looked tired because he carried too much, who wrote "question everything" on the board like it was both an assignment and a warning. On the final day, Mrs. Rodriguez handed out our last graded tests. Mine had a single note written at the bottom in a pen I didn't recognize. "Keep that curiosity alive." The handwriting wasn't hers. I don't know how long I stared at it before realizing it looked just like his. When I looked up, the hallway outside the classroom door was empty, but I could have sworn I heard the faint squeak of his old shoes fading down the corridor, the sound of a ghost that wasn't ready to rest. That night, I dreamt of his classroom filled with light, the windows open, the plants alive again, the envelope back on his desk, waiting to be opened. By June, Mr. Kellerman had become less of a man and more of a story, told and retold until even we couldn't tell which parts were real. Some said he was sick. Some said he was fired. Some said both. All I knew was that a good man had vanished, and the silence he left behind felt louder than anything he'd ever said. We were 13, and already we'd learned that sometimes people disappear, not because they die, but because no one fights to keep their story true. And that's exactly what we failed to do. I never expected the rumor to find me again, but it did, 15 years later, in a hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and late-night coffee. I was 27, a pediatric nurse working the overnight shift at Children's Memorial Hospital, where time blurred between heart monitors and whispered prayers. Around 2 a.m., as I refilled IV bags in the quiet corridor, I heard a voice I hadn't heard since middle school. Gentle, steady, the same cadence that used to make complicated lessons feel like secrets being shared. The new treatment protocol should reduce the nausea, the voice said softly. We'll keep monitoring his levels and adjust as needed. My hands froze around the plastic tubing. That voice belonged to Mr. Kellerman. It couldn't be. But when I turned the corner, there he was. Older, yes. Lines around his eyes, silver at the temples, but unmistakable. The same kind expression, the same calm gravity. Only this time, he wore teal scrubs and a stethoscope around his neck. He was talking to a mother and father outside a hospital room. Behind them, I glimpsed a little boy, pale, but smiling under a blanket covered in cartoon planets. Thank you, Dr. Kellerman, the mother said, voice trembling. Dr. Kellerman. The words didn't make sense at first. I watched him comfort them with the same patience he'd once used on a room full of restless seventh graders. When they disappeared into the room, he stood in the hallway for a moment, updating notes on his tablet. I took a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Excuse me, I said. He looked up. The second his eyes met mine, recognition flickered across his face, not instant, but deep. You were one of my students, he said slowly, then smiled. Third row, always curious. You used to ask why baking soda and vinegar react that way. I laughed, stunned he remembered. You remember that? He chuckled. I remember students who loved questions more than answers. You were one of them. What are you doing here? I asked, though the answer was literally written on his badge. I'm a pediatric oncologist, he said, matter of fact, as if he'd always been one. Been here about 8 years. I blinked. You're Dr. Kellerman now. He smiled faintly. Technically, yes, though most of the nurses still call me David. My brain scrambled to catch up. The rumors, the tears in his car, the pills, the missing envelope, everything we'd believed came rushing back, the certainty that he was dying. In 7th grade, I said slowly, we thought you were sick. His expression softened, a shadow moving across his features. I wasn't sick, he said quietly. My son was. The hallway tilted a little. Your son? He nodded. Tyler. He was 4 when I started teaching at Roosevelt. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a heart monitor beeped in steady time with my disbelief. All at once, the puzzle of that year rearranged itself. Every phone call, every tear, every skipped meal. And the picture it formed broke my heart. The phone calls, I said. Hospital updates, he confirmed. The crying in the car, bad test results, the pills, anti-anxiety medication. I was having panic attacks between classes. I tried to hide it from everyone. I swallowed hard. The weight loss, the exhaustion. Stress, he said, his voice low. Tyler's treatments were brutal. Some nights I slept in hospital chairs, then went straight to teach. I told myself routine would help me cope, but eventually... He trailed off, staring down the hallway. Eventually, something had to give. So you left teaching? He nodded. When Tyler needed a bone marrow transplant, he couldn't be left alone for more than a few hours. I chose to be there. His eyes flicked toward the room he'd just left. Watching what he went through changed me. The doctors, the nurses, they kept us alive in more ways than one. They explained things no parent should have to understand, but they did it with grace. I thought, if I ever survive this, I want to be that for someone else. My throat tightened. So you went back to school? Night classes, pre-med, then medical school, residency, the works. He smiled, and for a moment, I saw the same warmth he'd carried into that 7th grade classroom. I traded one kind of teaching for another. I leaned against the wall, trying to process everything. We all thought you were dying. We even left gifts on your desk. He looked down, laughing softly, though his eyes glistened. I still have some of those letters. You kids were my one bright spot that year. There was a silence between us then. Heavy, but not uncomfortable. Only truth settling into old wounds. How's Tyler? I asked finally. His face brightened. 21 now, pre-med at Stanford. Wants to be a pediatric oncologist. I couldn't help it. Tears spilled before I could stop them. He made it. He made it, he echoed. And he's thriving. I covered my mouth. All those years we were so wrong. He smiled, the kind that carried gratitude and grief at once. You weren't wrong about the sadness. You just misunderstood who it belonged to. I wanted to apologize for every rumor, every whispered theory, every time we'd imagined his death, but he shook his head before I could speak. You don't owe me an apology. You were children trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Honestly, he paused. You probably saved me. Teaching those kids, you kids, gave me something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. His pager buzzed. A nurse poked her head around the corner. Dr. Kellerman, the Pratt family's asking for you. He nodded, then turned back to me. It's good to see you, Maris, truly. You too, I whispered. He started to walk away, then stopped. You asked the hard questions back then. Don't stop asking them now. When he disappeared into the patient's room, I stayed where I was, hand against the cool wall, heart racing like it was trying to catch up to the past. Later that night, during break, I opened my old email account, the one I barely used, and searched for my 7th grade classmates. One by one I found them. Tessa, Brianna, Madison, Marcus, Angela, Derek. The names felt like fingerprints from another life. Does anyone remember the rumors about Mr. Kellerman? I typed. I hovered over send for a long time, because now I knew. The rumor we'd spread wasn't about a man dying. It was about a man who had already begun to transform. And the next chapter of that story wasn't over yet. The replies came within hours, even though it was past midnight in most of their time zones. Tessa, I knew it. I always knew something was wrong, just not like that. Brianna, wait, he's alive? I thought, Madison, oh my God, Maris, you have to tell us everything. By morning, our old class group chat was alive like a ghost resurrected through Wi-Fi. Everyone had something to confess, memories of gifts left on his desk, things they'd seen, questions they'd never dared to ask. Guilt bubbled up through every message. When I told them about Tyler, the leukemia, the transplant, the recovery, there was silence for a few minutes. Then Tessa messaged again. We need to tell his story, the right way this time. I hesitated. He's a doctor now, I texted back. He's not some urban legend, and he asked me to protect his son's privacy. But Tessa was relentless. She'd become a journalist, and she still had that same instinct for truth, the kind that cut deep. I'll get his consent, she promised. I'll write it with compassion. Let people know what he lived through, how he turned it into something good. I wanted to believe her. 2 weeks later, she called me. I just spoke to him. My heart jumped. You what? He remembered me, she said softly. He said if telling his story helps one parent, one teacher, or one kid going through something similar, he's fine with it. I sat there in stunned silence, relief mixing with dread. You're really doing it then? Yes, Tessa said, but not like a headline, like a legacy. The article went live 3 weeks later. The science teacher who became a doctor, how one man's tragedy turned into his calling. It was beautiful, painfully so. Tessa had written it with empathy, layering every fact with the heart behind it. She described the weight of those classroom whispers, the way we'd mistaken grief for illness, the way he'd carried both with quiet grace. She told the story of Tyler, the boy who'd beaten cancer and now studied medicine. The internet exploded. By morning, it had gone viral. Shared across teaching forums, parent groups, cancer support pages. Donations flooded the hospital where Dr. Kellerman worked, funding a new family support center for oncology patients. The school district even released a public statement honoring his time as a teacher. For the first time, our rumor did something good, but it came with consequences. A week after publication, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, I owe him an apology. It was from a woman named Elaine Matthews. She was the parent who'd filed that anonymous complaint 15 years ago, the one that helped push his leave request through faster. My daughter told me Mr. Kellerman stayed after school with her every day to help her catch up on labs. I thought it was strange. I never asked questions. I just panicked. I was a single mother in a divorce, angry at everyone. I didn't mean to ruin his reputation, but the complaint gave the administration what they wanted, an excuse to let him go. I didn't know he had a sick child. I didn't know I was helping them push him out when he needed support the most. She ended the email with a line that stayed with me. If you see him again, please tell him that I'm sorry, and tell him I finally understand that kindness sometimes looks like staying too long after hours. I forwarded it to Tessa, who added a short epilogue to her article. The parent who filed the complaint came forward this week. She's since volunteered at the Family Support Center named in Dr. Kellerman's honor. It was redemption in the most unexpected form. The next month, Mrs. Patterson from Roosevelt reached out. She'd read the article too. Her voice trembled when I answered the phone. "I found something, dear," she said. "I think it belongs to you kids." She sent it by mail, a sealed manila envelope, aged and frayed, the handwriting unmistakable. "To period 1 if I'm out." The same one that had disappeared from his desk all those years ago. Inside were 6 pages, written in blue ink. Each page ended with a simple line, "Stay curious." The first page read, "Science is just a fancy word for hope, the belief that every problem has an answer, even if it takes a lifetime to find it." The second, "If you ever feel small, look up. Every star you see exists because someone refused to give up on light." And the last page, "Question everything, but never doubt the power of kindness. Curiosity without empathy is just another experiment that fails." I cried reading it. So did everyone else. We scanned the letters, framed them, and sent the originals to Dr. Kellerman's office. He replied within a day. That envelope was my safety net. I couldn't face the thought of leaving without saying goodbye. Knowing it finally found you, that's a gift I didn't know I needed. He told us the Family Support Center had officially opened, and the hospital wanted him to lead a new outreach initiative, a program connecting doctors and students, bridging science and humanity. "Would Roosevelt Middle be interested in being the pilot school?" he asked. I smiled through tears. It would be perfect. The next semester, the hospital's education team, led by Dr. Kellerman himself, walked back into the same building where the rumors had once started, and this time they came to plant truth in its place. He asked me to come too. I took a personal day and stood by the doorway of the science lab, watching him set up equipment for a demonstration. For a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself, the past sitting quietly beside the present. I caught his eye. He gave me that same calm, knowing smile. "Ready to open some minds again?" "Always," I said. And as the first curious 7th grader raised their hand, I realized something. Our rumor had ended where it began, in a classroom full of questions. Only this time, the answers would finally be the truth. The first time I walked back into room 214 at Roosevelt Middle, the smell of dust and disinfectant hit me like déjà vu. The layout had changed. Newer desks, a smartboard instead of a whiteboard. But the bones were the same. The windows still overlooked the courtyard, where we used to eat popsicles during lunch. The radiator still groaned under the same chipped paint. And standing at the front of the room, where our favorite roomer had once lived, was Dr. David Kellerman, alive, steady, and exactly as kind as I remembered. He wasn't alone. Beside him stood his son Tyler, now 21, tall, confident, with his father's eyes. That same patient calm that made you believe every question had an answer if you just stayed curious long enough. "Good morning," Dr. Kellerman said, smiling at the sea of 7th graders. "I used to teach in this very room, 15 years ago. Back then, your desks were covered in baking soda and vinegar. I hope some of you like experiments because today we're doing one." A few students perked up, leaning forward. Tyler grinned. "The experiment's about hope." It wasn't part of any curriculum, but the students listened like it was sacred text. Dr. Kellerman told them about curiosity, how science wasn't just about answers, but about caring enough to look for them. He talked about staying after school to help students who didn't believe they were smart enough, about how those same kids changed his life in ways they'd never understand. I stood near the back, taking it all in. He never mentioned his son's illness. He didn't need to. The story was there, woven between every pause. When Tyler stepped forward, his voice shook only slightly. "My dad says teaching and medicine aren't that different. Both are about helping people understand the unknown. When I was 6, I was very sick, and there were a lot of things I didn't understand. But he explained them in ways that made me less afraid." A small girl in the front row raised her hand timidly. "What were you sick with?" Tyler hesitated, glancing at his father. Dr. Kellerman nodded. "Leukemia," Tyler said gently, "but I got better." The girl frowned thoughtfully. "So, you were like one of your dad's patients?" He smiled, exactly like that. The room went quiet in that reverent way kids fall silent when they realize they're hearing something real. Then another voice, smaller still. "My little brother has cancer." Every head turned. The girl who'd spoken sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice trembled. "The doctors say he's going to be okay, but my mom cries sometimes. She thinks I don't see, but I do." Dr. Kellerman knelt beside her desk. "What's your brother's name?" "Caleb," she whispered. Caleb is lucky to have you, he said. You're paying attention. And you know what? Your parents aren't crying because they've lost hope. They're crying because they love him so much. Love can make us brave and scared at the same time. The girl nodded, a small tear tracing her cheek. If your family ever needs someone to talk to, he added, handing her a small hospital card, you tell them to call me. Tell them I said they're doing just fine. I turned away, blinking back tears. Tyler was watching his father with quiet pride, the kind only a child who's seen both fear and healing can understand. When the bell rang, the students crowded around Tyler, asking questions. Did it hurt? What's the hardest part of being sick? Do you still like hospitals? Tyler answered each with honesty and warmth. Yeah, it hurt sometimes. Yeah, hospitals were scary, but they're also where I met the people who saved my life, and now I want to be one of those people. A boy at the back asked, Isn't being a doctor hard when you know what it feels like to almost die? Tyler's voice caught slightly. It's hard and easy, he said. Hard because I see fear in every parent's eyes, but easy because I know what words can actually help. Dr. Kellerman smiled. He's right. Medicine isn't just science, it's translation. You take fear and turn it into something people can understand. As the last students filed out, I noticed the small plaque now hanging above the classroom door. It gleamed in the afternoon light. Question everything, and care even more. I ran my fingers over the words. Did you put this here? I asked. Tyler did, Dr. Kellerman said. He says it's our family motto now. We both laughed quietly. Then, as we were packing up, Tessa walked in with her press badge swinging from her neck. Don't worry, she said, seeing our faces. No cameras this time, just a visit. She leaned against a desk. It's funny. I used to think telling the story was the important part, but this... She gestured around the classroom. This is what stories are supposed to do. Change things, I finished. She nodded. Exactly. Dr. Kellerman looked around the room. The desks, the kids' drawings taped to the walls, the laughter still echoing from the hallway. You know, he said softly, when I left this building 15 years ago, I thought I was walking away from teaching forever. Turns out I was just changing classrooms. Outside, the sun had dipped low enough to cast gold through the windows, warming the room in a way it hadn't felt in years. For the first time since 7th grade, the classroom didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. 5 years passed faster than I could process. The family support center that started as a donation wave from Tessa's article had grown into a full department. Counseling rooms, family lounges, even a small library where patients could read or simply sit and breathe. Dr. Kellerman was now the head of pediatric oncology education outreach, and Tyler, once the quiet boy we'd only known through rumor, had officially become Dr. Tyler Kellerman, MD. When I received the invitation to his medical school graduation, I didn't hesitate. The envelope was crisp and simple, embossed with a gold seal. Inside, the handwriting made me smile. Maris, it would mean a lot if you could be there. You're part of how all this started. Tyler. The ceremony was held at the university auditorium, the same kind of place we'd sat in during assemblies, only bigger, brighter, full of possibility. Every row buzzed with families and professors, proud eyes and cameras ready to capture futures being handed out one diploma at a time. When Tyler's name was called, Dr. Tyler Kellerman, Pediatric Oncology, the applause thundered. I found Dr. Kellerman in the front row, standing, clapping until his palms must have stung. His eyes shone, and for a brief moment, he looked like the young teacher I'd once known. The man who taught us to believe the smallest experiments could lead to the biggest answers. Later, at the reception, I joined a small circle of familiar faces. Tessa was there with a notepad she promised she wouldn't use. Brianna, now a teacher herself. Marcus, a cancer researcher. Madison, working in hospital administration. Even Derek, who'd flown in from another state to surprise everyone. Look at us, Tessa said, shaking her head with a smile. Half the class ended up in education or medicine because of him. Maybe because of all of them, I said, glancing toward the stage where both Kellermans stood talking to the dean, father and son, teacher and student, survivor and healer. When we approached them, Tyler's grin was wide enough to split the night. You all came. We wouldn't miss it, Marcus said, handing him a small box. Inside was a glass paperweight, etched with a tiny atom, its orbit path spelling the words, "Never stop asking why." Tyler laughed. That's perfect. Dr. Kellerman turned to us, his expression soft. You were the first kids who made me realize that science and compassion belong in the same sentence. Thank you for not letting that lesson die. Brianna wiped a tear. You're the reason we didn't stop believing in good teachers, even when we grew up. He chuckled. And you're the reason I didn't stop believing in second chances. Months later, Tyler started his residency at the same hospital where his father worked. I visited the pediatric ward one morning to drop off some forms and saw something that froze me in place. Through the glass, I spotted them side by side, two doctors with the same last name, walking slowly down the corridor together. The elder Kellerman paused at a room where a small child sat cross-legged on the bed, pale but smiling. Tyler knelt beside the bed, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began folding it. Within seconds, a paper airplane glided across the room and landed in the child's lap. The girl giggled, clapping. See that? Tyler said gently. Now you have to make one too. It's science, and a little bit of magic. Dr. Kellerman stood behind him, pride written across every line of his face. I didn't interrupt, I just watched. The rumor that had once haunted a hallway full of kids had turned into this, a father and son who had learned to make light out of the darkest parts of their story. 6 months later, the hospital hosted a fundraiser in their honor, the Kellerman Lecture on Compassion in Science. It was standing room only. The audience was packed with doctors, teachers, students, and parents, people who'd read about the story that started as gossip and ended as legacy. When it was his turn to speak, Dr. Kellerman began simply. 15 years ago, a group of middle schoolers thought their science teacher was dying. They were wrong, but not entirely. The person I was then did have to die, so that the one standing here could be born. He paused, letting the quiet fill the room. I thought I was teaching them about chemical reactions. What they taught me was about human ones, the way kindness multiplies when it's shared, the way compassion changes formulas you can't see. He looked toward me in the front row and smiled. And to one student in particular, thank you for asking the hard questions then and now. The applause rose and didn't stop for a long time. After the event, we gathered in the hospital's rooftop garden, the city glowing beneath us, a soft wind carrying the scent of rain. Tyler leaned against the railing beside his father. You ever think about what life would have been if none of it happened? He asked. Dr. Kellerman considered it. Sometimes, I might have taught 30 years of science classes, graded 1,000 lab reports, retired quietly. It would have been a good life, but I wouldn't have saved the lives I've saved. And you wouldn't have become the man you are. Tyler smiled. Guess tragedy can be a pretty good teacher. It is, his father said softly, but only if you let it teach you the right lessons. The group fell quiet, the city lights flickering like stars. Tessa finally broke the silence. You know what's crazy? We were kids spreading a rumor, and somehow that rumor turned into this, a legacy. Dr. Kellerman chuckled. Rumors are just unfinished stories. You finished ours. When I left the hospital that night, I took one last walk through the pediatric ward. The halls were dim and still, the kind of quiet that held its breath. From one of the rooms came a burst of laughter, a small voice saying, "Do it again," followed by the rustle of paper wings. I peeked through the doorway. Tyler was there, teaching a little boy how to launch a paper airplane. Ready? He said. The boy nodded, eyes bright. The plane soared, looping once before gliding into his father's hands, who stood beside the bed, smiling through tears. The moment was small, ordinary, perfect. I turned to leave, but paused at the door, whispering to no one, he's still teaching. Because he was, and always would be. The rumor we'd spread in 7th grade was that our teacher was dying. The truth was that he was learning how to heal, and in doing so, he taught the rest of us to do the same.